guest today on Extinction Radio is Stuart Scott. Stuart is an activist for the Earth, and he is also executive director of the United Planet Faith and Science Initiative at upfsi.org. Most importantly, he's devoted to changing business as usual and promoting sustainable habitation on Earth. And well, you are right now most foremost an activist, and you have a rather unusual form of activism.
Some years ago, I quit my day job literally to focus more on the specific problem within the array of environmental ecological problems we've got that I thought was most serious, which was climate. Basically, when I saw Al Gore's movie Inconvenient Truth, a light bulb went off and I said, oh, this is the one. This is the one coming at us. And so I quit my day job about a year later and went off to where I thought I could have the most impact, not being sure what it was I was going to do there. I went off to the UN climate negotiations, the COP. That was COP 14 in Poland. And I went with the specific intention of helping anyone from the environmental community that needed help. And I managed to find ways of making a significant impact from then on. And it turned out that my expertise was sort of as an impresario in doing press conferences at the UN climate talks. And I turned that over the years, I turned that into something I'm calling now Climate Matters TV, where I realized successively that I didn't need to do just one at a COP. I could do several. I could do one a day. And I went from 1 or 2 to 6 in Lima, to 11 in Paris, and I did 14 in Marrakesh. And they've become a TV show. So I have sort of hacked, in the positive sense of the word, the UN press conference facilities into my soundstage, which I could not afford otherwise. And so I do a TV show, which is not about the news of the day so much, which is climate news coming from the COP, but it's about aspects of the climate situation, solutions, I don't call them solutions anymore, say interventions, the politics, the things that are being left out or unsaid, the disingenuous nature of the positions of negotiating nations. And I make those the subject of these TV programs. And then they become perhaps anointed by having been done at the COP, and they go into general circulation on my YouTube channel. So that's my current form of activism. I'm focused on a Nobel Peace Prize initiative because in order to change what's going on, things seem so bad when you look at the big picture. We have to create change at the highest possible level. Anyhow, this Nobel initiative is a peace prize. If I can just give some letters for it, NP numeral 4 SD.org. And we have about 10 days more for nominations and endorsements to be received this year. And we'll do it again next year. So time doesn't matter if you're hearing the program later. Nobel Prize for Sustainable Development. And it's configured so that the 3 candidates for this nomination form a new meme or the interruption of an old meme that is doing us in. The field of sustainable development, I feel, largely grew out of a work that was sponsored by the Club of Rome. They are not a household word. They commissioned a report called The Limits to Growth in the early 1970s, which came out of MIT. It was a computer study that was done where the professors doing it, the researchers doing it, repeated their computer model with different assumptions over and over and over, plotting industrial growth, population, ocean life, various measures of the biosphere and the human economic system. And they found that the model would consistently show human population peaking and declining, sometimes precipitously, sometime during this century. And the only way they could avoid the decline was by making assumptions that we were at that point dealing with our environmental ecological problems, and we haven't. And this was 1972, the report came out. So here we are decades later facing the same problems, but worse. Anyhow, Club of Rome for the Limits to Growth report. Mainstream economists scoffed at the notion that the Earth actually had limits. To many of us, it's like duh. There are obvious limits to the Earth. The second candidate is a gentleman by the name of Herman Daly. He was a World Bank senior economist for 6 years, in charge of their Department of Environmental Sustainability. But he kept trying to get them to see that their investing was in no way, shape, manner, or form sustainable towards sustainability. And after 6 years, he was a bit ahead of his time. He gave up, frustrated, and resigned. Since then, the World Bank has realized more of the problems, but they are still, unfortunately, tied to this mainstream economic growth meme that is the problem. That is the problem we've got. We have an economic system which is almost universally implemented, and the nation that dares to not implement it is smacked down through the IMF or the World Bank. I'm talking about Costa Rica, where they had an independent banking system, but they were brought into line by the international banking system, and now they have both. But this system posits that there is no limit to the growth of the human economy, and anything organic is limited by the container. It has a limit to growth. So it's an untenable assumption that the system makes, and that's why we're getting into problems. Climate change is just the results of our ignoring the limits of the carbon sink of the planet. Okay, the third nominee, someone who is a household word, actually his real name is Jose Manuel Bergoglio, which is not a household word, but his pseudonym is Pope Francis. Very few people in the West, in the developed world, have not heard of Pope Francis. You might find some people in remote corners who haven't, but he is one of the most famous people on earth. And he has, since he took over, I held my breath when he took the name Francis, because Saint Francis is the patron saint in Catholicism of the environment, pretty much. And sure enough, he turns out to be very astute in the environmental, ecological, ethical problems, on point with sustainability, with that if we don't get to a fair, just, equitable, ecologically sound economic system, we are cruising for bruising, although he does not use those terms. So Pope Francis is the third nominee, and I've been told that he might win it on his own. So I'm trying to offer the Nobel Committee an alternative to just adding to the personality cult of Pope Francis, where if they awarded it in the manner that you'll see on np4sd.org, if they awarded it in that proposal, then it would be to his message, not to the man, but to the message. Now, let me encourage people listening, again, to go to that website, do an endorsement at a minimum.
Well, those are very impressive people that you're putting up for that Nobel Prize for the Sustainable Development. So, in general, how serious do you assess our situation to be? I mean, do you have any hope that we're going to pull out of the ecological nosedive that we appear to be in? What's your opinion of that? I mean, we've got a climate change denier who's just today, as you know, this is a very notable day that we're recording this interview. It's just taken over the U.S. government. So could you talk about this a little bit?
Sure. Per the inauguration of a new president, President Trump, I find people don't want to talk about his name, but he's like, the one whose name we shall not mention in the Harry Potter series. But, there's a spiritual symbol, the yin-yang sign, which is very familiar. And the message is that contained in everything is the seed of its opposite. So as dark or bad a time as this seems, ecologically speaking, where Trump, instead of draining the so-called swamps, is filling the swamps with just his own demons and alligators. In, as bad as it looks for the environment, it's a point of change. And he is empowering our base. That is, he is activating the people who see that we have a huge problem. The size of the problem, there's no absolute. One of the things that I fault a gentleman by the name of Guy McPherson for, who's very famous in climate change circles for saying, "Oh, it's all over, kiss your kids goodbye," is for his absolute judgment. And the universe is far too complex to say it's all over. I think we have a huge probability that our population, human population, will decline radically in this century. The heating itself is going to make it hard to grow food. And there will be warfare. There'll be a lot of starvation and disease and warfare over dwindling resources and the geopolitical shifts, not just oil, not just energy, but the geopolitical shifts for who is left able to grow food in a world where the mid-latitudes are heating uncontrollably. That being said, it's not a time to give up, because the act of doing something is redemption in itself. I don't mean that word in spiritual terms, but it's got that spiritual overtone, which I'll go to. It makes you feel better. You're not just sitting and doing nothing. You're not waiting for somebody else to get moving. You're saying, I can change, and I'm important and meaningful, and I can change what's going on. And that's important to one's personal sanity. I've found I go through these manic episodes, and I find I always come back to life when I get working again, when I get busy. So.
Yeah, well, action is the antidote to despair. Now, I'd like to kind of jump back to something that you just mentioned. You mentioned Professor Guy McPherson. He has a very large following. What is the difference between your vision and how he says that this thing is going to play out, and especially the time frames? Professor McPherson's time frames for this ecologic meltdown and extinction of species on Earth is very, very short. Do you really think that the Earth is going to fold down that quickly, or do you see a different vision?
His view that is essentially the same as I've just expressed, that the heating of the mid-latitudes will create huge problems. As for the 5 to 10 year timeline for the extinction of all life on Earth, I think he's wrong. I think he's dead wrong. I think life is much more robust than that. Extremophiles, tube worms exist near sulfur vents in underneath the ocean. How more hostile an environment. So as long as some life is left, it will regenerate into a differentiated planet with some new dominant species, perhaps wiser than ours. And I allow for the possibility that some humans may survive. Now, I'm talking in an extremely apocalyptic view, and I'm talking kind of matter-of-factly, but to me, the future is a probability distribution. I think it's, again, highly probable that human population will decline radically in this century. I think it's highly improbable that all humans will disappear in this century. We're far too adaptable and clever. I can't say that the right people will survive. When I say right people, I'm saying the ones who will treat the planet more wisely. But I think our ability to destroy the ecology is going to be interrupted by the ecology itself. I think that's a self-controlling mechanism. If a species soils its environment, the environment will eliminate the species or reduce the numbers of the species, put it back in balance. So again, I think McPherson's wrong just in the fact that he makes these absolute statements. And in the human domain, there are very few, if any, probabilities that you can say are 100% or 0%.
What do you see about the downfall of civilization itself? Do you have some visions about that?
Yeah, and for that, I'll actually recommend that people go to a very, very nice source online. There's a gentleman by the name of David Holmgren. He was one of the two people who came up with permaculture. He was a grad student to Bill Mollison, who got, top billing, but I think Holmgren really was the source of permaculture, and that may be a term that's familiar to many of your listeners. It's a systems design for human habitation in harmony with nature, with the environment. Anyhow, David Holmgren came out with a book called Future Scenarios, and then after he published the book, he made it a free book by putting it on his website, which is titled futurescenarios.org, O-R-G. It was a short book, so it's the website can be gone through in a few days, and it shows the possible futures. He divides it into 4 quadrants, depending upon how quickly we get it or don't get it, and how we respond. And they go from fairly benign, let's call it green tech, I forget what he calls it, I read it a long time ago, to brown tech, which is the worst, where we don't get it and we go pedal to the metal with fossil fuels until the climate just destroys the ability for humans to survive at the mid-latitudes. I think we are, especially with the election and inauguration today of Donald Trump, we're showing our propensity to go for brown tech, to go for the worst, where things will pedal to the metal, get worse, and we're going to use up all them fossil fuels until we can't anymore, until it's obvious, until there's some sort of revolution, if not on the ground in people's thinking, that we can't do this anymore. I don't know how that one will play out, but let me shift slightly to something I want to emphasize throughout this program. The reason that we are tanking, let's say climate change is the leading edge of the tsunami, but there are other dimensions of our ecological imbalance. We're rendering the ocean dead. We're the nitrogen cycle, the water cycle. There are so many things that are out if you look at it technically, but carbon cycle is the one that's going. But carbon is not the root cause of climate change. The root cause of climate change is unexpected. We have an economic system that holds money, the reproduction, the proliferation of money to trump, pun intended, to take precedence over everything else. That is a formula for disaster. Money, now this is a hard one to wrap your head around. Money is a virus of sorts, a virus of the mind, and it's taken over human civilization to reproduce itself. What do banks do? They push money out as fast as they can because that's how they make money. Again, pun intended. They make money by making money. That's where their profit lies. And that profit is funded into the is focused into the hands of fewer and fewer individuals. We get greater and greater disparities of wealth, which creates social unrest. And I could go into that topic alone for an hour, but the meme of money needs to change if we are going to survive. That's my major point of intervention right now. That's what the Nobel Prize is about.
Well, that's a pretty big thing to take on. I mean, money is very central to the way we just conceive of physical life on Earth in general. So that's going to be a big challenge for us to address that meme and overcoming that meme into something else. Do you really think that it's possible?
Now, I think it's possible. There are models that have survived for longer or shorter periods. All the major banks that bear the names of nations are private banks, and they name them that way to obfuscate, to confuse the public, to make them think that it is a sovereign national currency. It's not. Well, there's a saying, he who pays the piper calls the tune. To that extent, money and banks and the central banks call the shots. So we have a civilization that is where the shots are being called by people who are devoted to making more money and ignoring the consequences.
All right. Well, that is very, very interesting, and it's kind of alarming to understand that something that we considered so physical and so foundational to our culture is really just kind of a meme and a mass hypnosis. So,
It could be changed. It could be changed. But this current system does its best to reinforce the current meme through advertising, through through the media. Most of the public media is controlled by a few companies, a few conglomerates, and they are controlled by the meme of money because they make their money off of advertising. And so companies are not going to want to advertise in a media that says the truth about, say, climate change, that we have to stop doing what we've been doing, that we have to drive less, that we have to go away from fossil fuels. You understand? That's
no, we've got a big challenge in front of us to try and
when,
sort out as a species. Good luck to
when
us.
things start to change, though, in terms of the hope quotient, when things start to change, they change radically. As bad as they get, they can change very quickly.
Well, you bring a good point, and there should be sort of a critical mass that happens inside the mass consciousness in general, and it could well be that the inauguration and the ascent of Donald J. Trump could be the very catalyst that sends us into a cathartic crisis, and perhaps things will change, but we'll have to wait and see how that all comes out. But it's certainly giving us a lot to process, I would say.
Yeah.
At this time, I'd like to turn the topic over to the United Planet Faith and Science Initiative that you are the executive director of. And I'd like to delve into that a little bit and why it exists, and just go into the spiritual domain of it a little bit. Just please explain to us what is the United Planet Faith and Science Initiative about?
Okay, let me do this in stages. First, let's talk with the divide. It shouldn't be a divide. It's a continuum between the physical world and the non-physical world. Okay, now I think all of your listeners, whether they're spiritually inclined or agnostic or atheistic or have no inclination at all, never thought about it, will have to admit that there are things that are real which are not physical, like emotions, and that there are subtle energies or cues. Like, for instance, how can you tell when someone is in the room is not happy when it's not on their face? So there's an emotional level of communication. I don't think it's too great a leap. I used to, when I taught critical thinking, I'd ask my students, I'm going to define telepathy in very limited way, and I want to know how many people have experienced this, we'll call it telepathy, in one of these two forms, where you have a thought and the other person says it, or vice versa, and it's not because a song came on the radio. It's unrelated. Or you say, oh, I haven't called so-and-so, let me go call them, and you pick up the phone, and there they are trying to call you. And I would consistently get about 95% of the class saying that they had experienced one or both of those things. And I'd say, isn't it interesting how our scientific establishment denies telepathy, even though 95% of us have experienced something that we would have to call telepathy, for lack of a better term. Now, later on in the course, I would do that in the first couple of meetings of my class. Later on in the class, in the course, I would get to the topic of logical fallacies. And we've been studying these things. Many of them have Latin names because they've been known and studied for 2,500 years. Now, there's one called ad ignorantum, or ignorantium. I'm not a Latin scholar. And it translates as an appeal to ignorance, not an appeal to stupidity, but the logical fallacy is just because you cannot prove something is true is not a proof of its falseness. Okay? Mm-hmm. And vice versa. Just because you can't prove it's false does not mean it's true. And scientists fall into that. Politicians fall into that all the time. We all fall into that. on some occasions. It's very common. And it's used by the scientific establishment to say that there is no reality to the spiritual side of things. Now, I'm going to say we don't have to posit a God or a Buddha or universal mind to believe that there is something more. I mean, science itself says we only can see 95% of reality. There's, 5% of reality. 95% of it is dark matter or dark energy. Okay, there'll be a lot of stuff happening in that dark matter and dark energy. Okay, I'm sorry to go in so long, but I just want people to understand that I am a scientist, I'm a physicist, shall we say, and a metaphysicist. I'm looking at both sides, one foot in both worlds. There are sometimes I let one guide me and sometimes I let the other guide me, and they're always both guiding me. So in 2009, I had what I'll call an epiphany, despite the religious overtones of the word. I had the light bulb go off, an aha moment that climate change, the root cause was not carbon dioxide again. Now, this preceded my saying that our economic system is root cause. I had this epiphany first, that the root cause was a spiritual lack, that we were trying to fill an emptiness by stuff, by getting stuff, trips and iPhones and iPads and whatever the advertisers are pushing at us, perfumes, and you're not good enough unless you drink our beer or whatever. And that the problem was that our economic system was pandering to us in order to sell us more and more stuff to fill this emptiness. So if that's the case, that climate change is rooted in our filling our sense of emptiness rather than with self-appreciation, appreciation of family and nature and simple things in life, with stuff, then a way of countering climate change would be through the spiritual appeal. And I did the first meeting of many religions inside of the climate negotiations. I did a press conference out of it, and I called it the Interfaith Declaration on Climate Change. And the United Nations Climate Secretariat said, this is very good stuff. The head of the executive secretary of the climate of the FCCC is now messaging about the importance of the faith community. Please keep it up. Well, that evolved from a document, the Interfaith Declaration on Climate Change, which is still online. The Dalai Lama endorsed it. Archbishop Tutu endorsed it. We got some very, very famous people to endorse it. It became an initiative. Now, I didn't want to make it the Faith and Science Organization. I was told by one of my advisors, if you're an organization, other religious organizations will see you as a competition, as a threat to their funding, if nothing else. You're an initiative, which means you'll go away. And essentially, we will go away eventually for one reason. Everything has a beginning and an end. So it's an initiative that is trying to find the common ground between the scientific community and the faith community on the climate and ecological problem that we have.
And that might help you implement some of your key initiatives. Would you like to talk about your key initiatives that you've got going on at this point, and also critical leverage points that you're looking to take advantage of?
Ecological economics is the alternative to the current economic meme that I'm promoting. I encourage your listeners to Google the term ecological economics and not to confuse it for environmental economics. They sound similar, but they're different. Ecological economics says, environmental economics says if we just put a price on nature and let the market work itself out, everything will work out fine. That doesn't work because, for instance, Japan one year valued its wetlands at $16 billion. Well, that's chump change to wealthy people. And if given the chance to buy all the wetlands and build hotels, they would do it. So there are problems. That's just one example. Ecological economics is the real deal. I encourage your audience to look up Herman Daly, look up ecological economics. Now, in line with the Nobel Prize that I'm going for, I feel that Pope Francis is not only famous, he's right on. he was, I believe, a chemist or a biologist in his
He's a
training,
chemist.
a chemist,
Yeah,
and so he understands science.
he
And there's
does.
a contradiction apparently between science and religion for him. And he came out with I say he came out with, he was the inspiration for a document that came out in 2015 called the Papal Encyclical. The title was Laudato Si, on the care of our common home. Laudato Si is Latin. It's the first two words from or Italian, first two words from a prayer that is attributed to Saint Francis, and it means praise be you. Laudato Si, if you look at it, if you get past the first 6 pages, say, which is citations backward through other popes' writings to show that this is not something new, it's establishing credibility so that the church itself would not criticize it as some sort of departure from Catholic tradition. I'm not Catholic, by the way. I'm not even Christian. After you get through those first religious citations, you find that it is a very clear indictment of what the document, what Pope Francis calls the dominant technocratic paradigm of society, and how that is ruining things, how that's ruining our chances of survival. I recommend it. It's about an 80-page document, but every paragraph is numbered, and they all read very clearly and lucidly. And so you can just kind of put it on your bedstand and read a couple paragraphs when you have a chance. So I'm trying to take advantage of the very enlightened Pope that we currently have, of his notability and his being spot on his message, on that part of his message. And I'm trying to create a marriage between ecological economics and the teachings of St. Francis, and as exemplified in Laudato Si. The scientists and engineers who want to do the research are not playing fast and loose with the ecology of Earth and our health. They say we need to be doing the research now to find benign ways of, for instance, keeping the Arctic cool, because we are melting the Arctic. And if once the Arctic ice is gone, then the heating of the planet will resume and accelerate. And in order to do that, there are some fairly benign sounding ways. Cloud brightening by spraying salt water up into the air. Well, okay, if you're not near land, then it's particles of ocean water that are sprayed up at an altitude that fall back into the ocean. Doesn't sound too harmful. But because there is such a mental block in society about even doing the research, scientists are not being allowed to find what might be able to be deployed and taken to scale when we decide, we need something. So we really should be. So there's a series of programs that I did in Climate Matters TV out of COP22 in Marrakesh that are related to geoengineering. And I recommend that even people who believe that the military is experimenting with chemtrails should take a look at those, because I'm not talking about chemtrails. I'm not talking about Dow Chemical.
Mm-hmm. Even the marine cloud brightening, though, it occurs to me that this is really just kind of a mitigation and something that needs to be maintained consistently forever while we live under an exponentiating, expanding population and technosphere and degradation of the biosphere. So, I mean, honestly, just give you my opinion, I don't think that these techno fixes, even if they're benign, like marine cloud brightening and geoengineering efforts like that, I don't think that I don't think there's any magical techno fix to get us out of this situation. What's your opinion of that?
No, I don't think there's any magical techno fix. The cloud brightening would buy us time, perhaps. We're trying to stave off the exponential acceleration of climate change. Hopefully we can stave it off long enough until there's a political realization that we cannot expand our economies forever. that the economies of Earth are ruining the Earth. Now there are ways that we can adapt where we can still have jobs and still have reasonable levels of income. Herman Daly, my mentor in that area, says that, well, we need to go away from expanding the size of the economy, the throughput, to expanding the complexity, where there are more transactions and more service-oriented transactions that don't consume physical resources or as much physical resource. Anyhow, but in the scheme of things, again, I think our expanding population will take care of itself in a very dire way. I think we're going to see, I don't think there's any way of our avoiding a decline, perhaps a collapse of population this century. So I'm sorry, I wrestle with that all the time. It's a horrific thing when I mean, why do you think all these zombie apocalypse movies are coming out now?
Well, Hollywood is always ahead of the consciousness and what's going on. So yeah, you just have to look at Hollywood and see what they're coming out with, and kind of gives you a little hint of the.
There's also a tendency geopolitically, historically, for when there are times of unrest, populations go for strongmen who they think will protect them, who promise all kinds of things. And that's being seen in political shifts around the world, including the one in the United States, where someone who has no political experience, his claim to fame is that he's a reality TV star and a self-made millionaire who the banks could not afford to let go bankrupt because they had too much money they were going to lose. So they had to refinance him when he was filing for bankruptcy. It's very interesting if you explore the history of this man. And you have him taking over the reins of arguably one of the most important nations on earth. The United States no longer is the preeminent, and we could be brought down a few pegs very easily if, for instance, the rest of the world got together and decided to stop valuing petroleum in dollars alone. The petrodollar, the United States economy would be set back a peg or two. Our dominance of the world would be set back a peg or two. And in fact, there are people who say that Saddam Hussein was brought down not because of the weapons of mass destruction, which didn't exist and which the CIA knew did not exist. It was brought down because he was trying to get the OPEC to go to a basket of currencies for transactions on oil. Interesting.
It is interesting. Well, how are we ever going to fix this? I don't know that we can. I mean, can you fix it from the top down? Can you fix it from the bottom up? I mean, we all know that changing our light bulbs is not going to cut it. What would you recommend that people listening to this show do? What actions can we take?
Okay, my first response is I call this moment in time an all hands on deck moment and an all of the above moment. So your light bulb, okay? Drive less, stop driving, get rid of your car and do ride sharing in the metropolitan areas. Yes, all of the above. But also look for the most strategic things that you can do. I happen to think offering this Nobel Prize proposal is a very strategic thing. So again, I encourage people to take a look at np4sd.org. If that prize were awarded that way, it would change the planetary meme. University presidents all over the world would say, do we teach ecological economics here? It's not the time to give up. It's the time when nature needs us most. Nature can do without us. We can't do without nature. And looking probabilistically, the work that I do, I'm trying to increase the probability that humans will survive, increase the numbers of humans that will survive through what we're going to go to. There's one scientist who put it very succinctly, Ira Leifert, atmospheric scientist. He said, some scientists are saying we should make plans to adapt to a 4 degrees centigrade hotter world. In my opinion, while that's good idea, one wonders what portion of humanity could adapt to that kind of world. And in my view, his view, it's just a few thousand people seeking refuge at the poles. A few thousand people. Well, again, everything we do counts. Little things count, but big things count more. That's obvious. That's a no-brainer. So do the little things and build on them. Make those habitual. We have to do things like the People's Climate March. We have to speak out. I mean, if everyone listening to this would make a habit of calling and expressing their opinion to their congressional representatives or their MP if you're outside the United States, that would make a big difference. Because, again, our political leaders are currently beholden to economic forces more than to the people they represent, because they only have to please those people once every 4 years in the election cycle, or 3 years, or whatever it is in your particular jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. Whereas they have to please their funders every day. They answer to the lobbyists every day. So we need to reclaim our democratic process by being an active democracy, not a passive democracy. Now, that's something very big. Okay? That's a big idea. The big things don't take a lot of money. The big things take a lot of vision. So.
A lot of vision, which would imply that we would need to wake up, and as people on Earth would need to galvanize themselves. There would need to be an awakening of awareness as to the absolute criticality of our biosphere meltdown currently underway, and not to mention the fact, as you are a former member of AMEG, that we are looking at an ice-free Arctic in the not too distant future in September. I mean, it could happen as early as September 2017, it could happen 2018, but the collapse of the Arctic sea ice cover is underway and imminent. It is a matter of time, and I do not believe that there's a way to bring back the Arctic sea ice once it goes, because the Arctic Ocean itself is too hot. We are in a pickle. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll answer that one simply. Yes, I agree. But again, it's not coming out of information technology, it's not a binary choice. It's not a Boolean, yes, all or on. It really looks bad. Okay? That's all the more reason to keep trying innovative strategies. And I want to go back to one point that I thought of while you were speaking. One of the things I think is critical is for people, nations without borders. The reason it's United Planet Faith and Science Initiative is to offer a mimetic alternative to United Nations, which accentuates our separateness. United Planet accentuates our oneness. Until we get out of the mindset that we are nations competing and get into the mindset that we are nations cooperating in the hugest challenge we've ever faced, we are probably wasting time. We're pissing away our opportunity. There's a movie that was very popular recently called Arrival. I'd encourage people to try to download it or get hold of a copy and watch it, because its central theme is, I won't get without giving away the movie, whether nations are going to get together or not, rising to this landing of 12 extraterrestrial ships at various places on Earth. Very, very, very stimulating, thought-provoking movie. So,
wonderful.
Arrival.
Well, thank you for that recommendation.
Yes, we need to realize our oneness. We need to realize that humanity is one, that we have a shared fate. And if we make that recollection, it will transcend boundaries. It will change our political perspective.
What a thing. And as we've just had Trump inaugurated today, and he's an isolationist and America first, it's really the opposite of everything that he's saying. So we are presented with the perfect quandary.
Let me also say that not everything that he stands for is wrong. There's one thing in particular, and I have not studied his position because I dislike the man, but that I will note, which seems to me to have merit, is trying to get the U.S. out of some of these international trade deals, which override national sovereignty. Okay, so that part of his platform, I'll have to say I support. I don't think we should be a part of NAFTA and TAFTA and FAFTA and PAFTA and whatever AFTAs they come up with, because those are all for the corporate benefit and not for the popular benefit, although they sell them to us with focus groups that, the result of focus groups saying, oh, if you just talk about jobs and how it will increase blah, 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 blah. They sell those programs to us, but they never seem to produce the benefits. The offshoring of jobs is what the NAFTA produced for the United States, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership will produce the same kind of thing, and it will override. It'll be a race to the bottom ecologically. The nation that has ecological requirements, environmental requirements that are stronger than a trading partner will be reduced, will be overridden. A corporation can sue a nation that says you can't dump your toxins here.
Well, we certainly have a lot of things to contend with. Good luck to us all in humanity in general, because I think really things are about to come unhinged, even more so than they have been. We've got abrupt climate change underway, and I can just expect that 2017 will bring us more rain bombs and other things that are going on.
We should say what a rain bomb is, because not everybody will know. A rain bomb is these incredible deluges of water where it looks like someone opened a spigot, and they've been caught on video and stills camera, and people who don't know what they search it online. And the other thing is you used an acronym. I always define my acronyms. AMEG, or AMEG. It's the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, and people may want to Google that, but the term AMEG is not a household word, so let's let people know what that means.
Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Well, we certainly have our work cut out for us, and
we do. I tell you, being an activist like I am, the pay stinks, but there's a lot of job security.
Well, that's right. Abrupt climate change is not going away anytime soon, and it's really just going to get worse. So let's see what 2017 shall bring us. And
and let's not just be passive in that. Let's get involved in what 2017 brings us.
Good point.
There's many groups. There's 350.org. I don't want to for fear that I'll leave out some or put in some are potentially controversial, but that's, I think 350.org is the epitome of a group that is worthy of support. Oh, I like Citizens Climate Lobby. I think that one is also, it's not apolitical, it's bipartisan. It's looking for bipartisan support. That's something that people all over the United States, and now there are chapters in other parts of the world, the Citizens Climate Lobby. They've taken a page from the playbook of the corporations, and they put it in gear in lobbying national governments to get serious about climate change.
Well, it certainly is way past time to get serious about it. We'll see how long the deniers can keep it up, but at some point, I would imagine they're going to have to say, yes, this is not normal and climate change is real. So we'll see when that happens. And thank you so much for joining us here today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.